And so please join me in welcoming Aaron Johnson. Most people call you AJ, right? Okay.
Well, good morning. Why don't we start out with a little video that was produced by University of Pittsburgh, advertising to the world what fantastic ability we had in Geri Allen. I think I have to start it. It's only be about 90 seconds.
It's like food for me, you know.
We don't have any.
Like a tonic. It's kind of improvising on this band. Okay. And then on cue, we're going to get together. Okay. This music is really a performance art. It is about participating. It's very community oriented. It thrives around people. I feel like the greatest musicians are also the greatest teachers. Music has always been a place where mentorship was a big aspect of how the next generations were developed. Give us maybe some body motion too, so we know you're moving on.
Okay.
Like that. I'm understanding more and more that one really does feed the other.
The great Geri Allen.
I've been in New York for 30 years before I came here to Pittsburgh, and living the life of a jazz musician and experiencing the community of that and meeting some of the great icons of the music and collaborating with them has really informed my life. And I like to be able to share those things in direct kinds of ways with my students.
That is really pretty cool. And in several respects, because you see just about every teaching Geri there. At the end, you saw large-scale Geri holding forth to a 100 plus student jazz history of jazz lecture. You saw Geri teaching a small ensemble and getting them to work together as a unit, and you saw interspersed in there very individualized instruction that Geri was doing on a very one-on-one basis, making a difference. So Geri coming to University of Pittsburgh was a coup and a homecoming. And we were talking this morning, and other than Mount, who beats me by about 18 years, I've known Geri longer than anyone on this panel because Geri was a freshman at Howard University when I was a senior in high school in D.C. And,
wow.
And all of us jazz musicians would run up to Howard to hang out with the big kids all the time. And so I knew her then. And then I went on to go to Carnegie Mellon University, play in the band at Pitt, and who arrives at Pitt as a grad student during my senior year in college, but Geri working on her master's degree. So our history is back in the 70s. And periodically, she has popped into my life to make a big difference. Yeah. And what about this button here? What's that for? I thought I would reflect on some things about Geri's. Geri's a very quiet person and a very reserved person. And having some insight into her early history at Howard and at Pitt, I can see the traces of that. You know, one thing that we have been dancing around is the kind of hostility towards female musicians in the jazz community and overall. Not Geri when Geri became Geri, because who would not love Geri when she's Geri? But when Geri was on the way to being Geri, she was just another female musician who was getting a whole lot of crap. And I remember a lot of that crap at Howard. Just a lot of murmuring about whether she played like a man or didn't play like a man, or whether she was attractive or whether she could be attractive. I noticed 90% of the guys didn't have to go through any crap like that. So this is the kind of backbiting and behind you kind of talk that I think Geri really loathed and really wanted to have her the discussion about her to be about her music, about her art, about the art that we all share, and really diminish this kind of gossip aspect of it. And, but, you know, that is, I think, over time cemented into one of her real personality traits about keeping her friends close and keeping other people out of her kind of emotional core. You know, and I think to our detriment that we kind of threw, as a society, through these kind of barriers up around her, because she was such a warm person when you got inside. Do I play this other one, the audio?
Sure.
Yeah, so we have an annual jazz concert. Our program was started by Nathan Davis, and Nathan's by far most successful and most prized student was Geri. And he really wanted Geri to come and take the reins from him. And so every year for the last 47 years, the last few under Geri, but the bulk of them under Nathan Davis, Nathan would invite his pals to come to Pittsburgh and have a really big concert. And we continue that tradition. And it's an academic setting, so you can't just have a good concert and get away with it. You have to make them say something useful in a seminar, like how the business works, or how the saxophone works, or how to make money in owning your intellectual property rights. And so we dedicated the last concert and seminars to Geri. And Farrah was with us, as she was yesterday, talking about, she led a discussion by our students about Geri as a teacher. And I wanted to play a brief excerpt of that to show you an aspect of her teaching. So the volume on this will be pretty low, so you might have to crank it a little bit. So because we're of the generation where we have to have pictures to go with our audio, well, this is what the scene was, but it's only audio. All right.
Okay, so all my questions are just
Really,
gone out the window
crank.
because you've already answered all of them. But I think, these kind of high expectations, intensity, at the same time humility, pulling things out of you didn't think you could do, and love. And I think that all those things are so true. And every one of us who ever worked with her in some way was her student, even if we came together as equals or collaborators in the same way. And so Aiden and I were having this conversation this morning about, this is leading to another question, but about even my own experiences with Geri. She believed that you needed to have exposure to all kinds of things to make you a better musician because you need to be a better person, and that would make you a better musician. And so she was in museums and looking at paintings and reading all the time and reading seriously and really interested in kind of the interdisciplinary nature of the arts and all of those things. But she would always try to bring me into the music, and I write about the music, but I'm not a musician, and I love the music, but I'm a writer, and I keep those boundaries, And so she'd say, okay, she'd like, write a spoken word piece for this thing I'm doing. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, read from the Billie Holiday book, and I'll play behind you. That's one of her little sneaky ways of doing it. Or, I have this idea, maybe you could be the historian on it. And I'm like, okay, sure. And then, right when we're in front of the people who are, supporting the project, she'd say, Barron's writing the script for this. So my question to you all, and it drove me crazy. But at the end, I was a better person, and I was a better writer, and lo and behold, I'd written a play. Who knew? So my next question for you, and some of you have already hinted at this, is can you share with us moments where you felt really challenged, and where you maybe even felt like, what is she thinking? There's no way. So kind of share that moment and then share what it felt like on the other side of it. Anyone. We don't have to go in order, so yeah.
we're working on, in the combo class that we referenced earlier, we're working on, I think it was the Lee Morgan tune, Siora. And then we were all practicing solo and rhythm, we stopped. And then she's like, all right. She's like, now sing your solo over the whole tune. And she's like, and all the piano. I remember that. And it's like, I'm not a singer. but everyone, I don't think there are any singers in the class, actually. Everyone took their stab at it. I thought mine was probably the worst with the good vibes. But after the fact, it was like, well, that wasn't actually that bad. And now I'm thinking about what it's like to sing it automatically after doing that. So now it's like a part of me trying to play it now. So that's my idea.
That's the clip, and I think every single one of us has been roped into that trap by Geri. Why don't you see if we get that journal restarted? Why don't you take a look at it? Why don't you just take a look at it first? And so for me, and Mount knows this, and then I'll turn this over. Mount knows this, that she said she had this vision for this concert in 3 locations using the internet with a couple of George Lewis's artificial intelligence pianos spread across the country, and musicians in California, in Southern California, in Northern California, and Pittsburgh. And AJ, why don't you see if you can make that happen? And can we have video and perfect internet connections? And so 600 person hours later, we had that concert. And thank you, Geri, because it was a tremendous accomplishment, and I wouldn't have volunteered for that. So.
Okay, that's a great story.
True. All right.
Should we pass it to Michael here? This is Michael Heller, who is an assistant professor also of music at the University of Pittsburgh. He's also an alumni of Harvard, so we know him well around here. He's, say the title of your book, since I don't have it written right here.
Loft Jazz, Improvising New York in the 1970s.
And it's a fantastic book. I recommend it, and very highly. And so, Michael, your experiences with
Thank you. Well,
Geri.
Thank you for having me here. I mean, it's a tremendous honor both to be here to pay tribute to Geri, especially since I didn't have the honor and the privilege of knowing Geri for as long as many of the people in this room, including AJ and, of course, Mount. I got to know Geri when I came to the University of Pittsburgh about 3 years ago, and I hoped and expected that I would be someone who would have a 2, 3, 4 decade-long relationship with her, and so her loss really struck me a great deal as well. Maybe I'll start with my story of Geri pushing me in a similar way, since we're in that mode, and like Ingrid and AJ say, everyone has one. My favorite one was, when I got to the university in the fall of my first semester, one of the first meetings we had was that Geri had scheduled a meeting with the dean of the School of Arts and Sciences about various things related to the jazz program. And it was me and Geri and AJ. And I was, I'm a green young faculty member. This is a big deal. I'm meeting with the dean for the first time. And Geri asked AJ and I to come about 10 minutes early just to go through what we were planning and all of that. And as part of that, the university had just acquired the Earl Garner Archive, which Geri had been instrumental in working with the Garner Foundation and getting that. There was a huge coup, a huge acquisition for us. So we're talking in this sort of pre-meeting with the dean, and Geri says, well, Michael, you do some things with archives. Can you do anything with the Garner Archive? And I sort of say, okay, well, I have a couple of ideas. I was thinking maybe we can put an exhibit together. Maybe I can do a class or something like that. And Geri says, okay, that sounds great. We'll talk more. Excellent. So I think, fine, no problem. So we get into the meeting, and again, I'm here with the dean for the first time, and we're talking about various things. And then at a certain point, Geri says to the dean, he says, well, we're planning a lot of things with the Garner Archive, and Michael has some very exciting plans about an exhibit coming up. Michael, do you want to tell the dean about this? And I'm sort of going, all right. So what choice do I have? So I sort of lay out, what I have, and I'm forced in this position to sort of lay it out as if this is a concrete plan and not just something to run my head. Which was part of Geri's brilliance, that she would sort of make you speak these intentions out loud and then go on to realize them. And I did. I mean, I taught that class that semester, and there's a Errol Garner exhibit that's up in the student union at Pitt to this day as a result of that. So Geri would, she would push you. And every one of the students on that panel had a similar story.
Yes.
The one other thing that I want to convey, and then I'll pass it on and speak to, is just how committed and dedicated an educator Geri was. And I say this partially because sometimes people would learn that I worked with Geri Allen, or even yesterday, speaking to some people, and would sort of assume, oh, well, how often was Geri in Pittsburgh? Would she fly in and teach her class a couple days a week? And there is a model for, the superstar genius artist doing that, of just coming and being a presence and teaching the students that way. And if that's all Geri had ever done, Pitt would have gotten every penny they paid to her. But that's not what she did. She was completely and utterly committed to educating the students. And she moved to Pittsburgh. She moved her family to Pittsburgh. She developed ties in the community. She was starting to work with schools. She worked with the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. She was in meetings. She was developing curricula. She was meeting with deans and meeting with everything. She was completely 100% engaged and was as devoted an educator as I've ever known. And the last sort of part of that too, and AJ knows this as well, is that whenever there was a problem with a student, AJ or I would get a phone call. Because Geri, she would respond to emails, but when there was something she really wanted to talk about, it was the phone. And so we might get a phone call at 10 o'clock at night, and it was always the same core of it. It was always, what do we do to help this student? What can we do to provide more support and more services to that one?
She's a parent too, and so although she was a jazz musician, those phone calls could also happen at 6 a.m. too,
Right.
which was like crazy. What you said about the community, so to illustrate that community point, that we're in the process of search for a new director of jazz studies, and how many searches are hinging on what we perceive and what story we're going to get from a candidate about their community involvement. I mean, that's one of the defining factors of the search, and that's been put on the table because of the precedent of Geri, right?
So let's go to Yoko Suzuki, who's an alto saxophonist and instructor in the Pittsburgh program, and a fabulous musician, and somebody that I know Geri cared a lot about, because when Geri was here a couple years ago, Geri took me aside and said, I really want to do something to help Yoko Suzuki with the and Geri was sort of asking me, how do I handle these deans? And so she was sort of seeking, advice on handling the politics of the institution for Yoko. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. No, what you said really, I don't know. I tried.
Just relax.
I'm sorry. So yeah, so Geri came. So I graduated from Pitt with a PhD in ethnomusicology and women's studies, and when she came to Pitt, she really, well, first thing she wanted to do is continue the legacy of Nathan Davis, right? So. And she always asked me for advice and suggestions, because she really wanted to value what the things that have been done in the program. And to me, it was just really amazing that I'm just an instructor, and she really certainly did not have to ask me my opinions, she could have just done whatever she wanted, but she really wanted to keep whatever things happened before her, and really wanted to just to listen to people not just me and some other instructors as well. And so the classes she taught first were history of jazz. That's a really big, it's like 350 class, 50 students class, and also jazz improvisation class, which I actually always sat in. So you probably saw, I don't know if you noticed that in the video. Yeah, I was in the background because I was always there. And so she somehow wanted me to be there too. That I think she was probably struck the level of the students, because she probably has only taught students who are quite advanced in the past, right? But I don't know if you know that our program is not a conservatory, so most students, even if they are music majors, we don't really have the auditions to, like, we give BA in music, not BM in music, so they are not musicians. So the improv class she taught, like, some of the students didn't even have like enough music proficiency to improvise, right? So she probably was very surprised, but so I was actually I felt very bad that these students don't even deserve her. I was like, inside of me was like really upset, like, why there are so many people who want to study with her, like, who are like really great musicians want to study with her. And these students, some of them, it's just really embarrassing that some of them didn't even know who she was, right? So I always had to tell them how fortunate they are, to have a teacher like her. Like, millions of people want to study with her. But anyway, I was just struck the way she really made the class accessible to all these people who didn't even, some of them didn't have like a good technique or anything. But, the video that showed, she really broke down music like into parts, like really basic parts, and then let them play. I think the biggest thing is about her is inclusiveness. That she really wanted to include everybody, and. She could have easily made that class to have some sort of like a prerequisite for the students to take it, but she did not do that because she did not want to turn away any students. And it was just amazing to see how she made the class accessible for really different levels of students. Some of the students had... I don't say they are advanced students, but like, intermediate level students were there too. So it was very difficult for her to teach the class like that, like, different levels of the students are there. But she really made it really accessible for everybody. And that was really striking. And then also she created this small ensemble class, which I co-taught with her. And later on, like when she became sick, I took it over. But that class too, that had like really different levels of students, but she really managed to include everybody. And sorry. But like more personal level, she really helped me in many different ways. As Ingrid said, I knew that she really tried to create a space for me, and that's what only she could do. That Nathan Davis tried to do the same thing for me too, but like the way she did was really effective. And then also I noticed that, you know, whatever she wanted to do, she really, as everybody knows, she's a very quiet person. She never raises her voice, right? Because even if she speaks very quietly, her voice is always heard. It's very, very strong voice. She's really quiet, but like her message always is heard. So yeah, that's really, I really wanted to, that's something I really, you know, learned, that you don't have to raise your voice when you know, when you want to make things happen. I mean, that's one thing I really admire about her. Mm-hmm. And then she also encouraged me to create a new class that I'm actually teaching, this class called Gender and Sexuality in Black Popular Music. And so when we talked about this first, she was like, Yoko, I understand about the gender part, but do you really need a sexuality in there? So I'm like, yes, Geri, it's really important, you know, things happening in current society, we really need to talk about this. And she was like, you probably know about her, right? She's very conservative. So, but okay, I wanted to learn more about this. Like, do you think there is like any resource at the at the university? And I said, yeah, there's like this. We have this Allies Network training that you know, that has like a training about sexualities and like transgender, all these issues. So she was too busy to participate in this particular training, but she really wanted to learn. She had a really open-minded attitude about everything. So, okay, well, I have so many things, but okay.
Okay, well, we can come back. But right now, why don't we hear from Mount Allen III, who is Geri's brother. We're so delighted to have him here, and he's Director of Operations at San Francisco Jazz, and worked very closely with Geri on some educational and technology projects, and we look forward to hearing.
May I
Yes, absolutely.
handle it from here? And do I get presenter mode on here? Perfect.
Yeah, I'll just put it up on the screen.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I bring you greetings from the beautiful state of California, and also from my home organization, the San Francisco Jazz Organization, the home of the SF Jazz Center. So I'd just like to expand a bit on what's been presented so far in terms of Geri's institutional participation. Really, Geri's participation beyond the institution of Pitt extends massively. SF Jazz was like a second home to her as far as I was concerned. I tried to have her there as often as possible, and specifically because, and I'm going to skip a couple of slides. Well, this is the SF Jazz Center, just in case you don't know of it or you've not been there. We have about a 700-seat theater where we opened about 5 years ago. The organization itself is about 35 years old, so we were a nomadic presenter until that time. Our founder, Randall Klein, came up with this idea that, you know, jazz needs a home. And at that time, there had only been one jazz home, which I also had the privilege and opportunity to participate in, and that was on the East Coast. That was Jazz at Lincoln Center. So I got to open this one too. As I mentioned, 700 seats. We do about 400 performances a year. And we're very, very involved. The thing that I'm most proud about this institution is its unique connection to education. We participate in what's called the Research Education Network. It's a national network that involves the universities basically across the entire country. And when Geri was thinking about coming to Pitt, we had this conversation. She said, you know, when I go to Pitt, I want to do something. I want to hit there. I want to have a big splash. What can we do? And I suggested to Geri, well, why don't we take advantage of this network and see where the possibilities of this network can fit in terms of your profile as you move forward, because one, you have a tremendous thing about outreach, and two, you like to connect to other institutions and do things. So we had this conversation, and that was the origin of what came to be the Mary Lou Williams Symposium, which was her first piece. You know, I recognize Vijay's in the room. I see Dr. Dwight's in the room. I don't remember if Ken was a part of that one, but you know, who else was there? Jason was there. The third piano. Oh, Geri. Geri was there. And so it was this wonderful, wonderful collection of performance that took place as Dr. AJ was saying, in various locations. And this was the incarnation prior to the one that he was referring to. And so as the conversation continued, you know, we looked at the possibility of this network having an impact on a larger scale. Because where this network really plays is in the science world. It's you know, Harvard has it, Yale has it, Princeton has it, Michigan has it, and what it is, it's like it is where big data lives. And so when you think about big data, mostly you're thinking about it in terms of science. But the fact of the matter is, the conversation Geri and I was having is, what's the opportunity of having this technology serve the arts and humanities? And so that's where it came from. So you know, here is where this is the outreach, just in terms of the potential jazz study programs of where this type of technology can have an effect. And then when you look at it in even a larger scale, this is where the network goes across the world. And it's a very, very specific network. Everybody doesn't get to play in it. It's very, very exclusive. And as a matter of fact, who doesn't get to play in it, I think, is as important as who does get to play in it. Who doesn't get to play in it, for instance, on the major scale, are historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic institutions of higher learning, Native American and tribal institutions of higher learning. Collectively, they're called minority-serving institutions of higher education. And so Geri and I's conversation was like, how do we get these institutions to participate in this game so Harvard can collaborate with Howard, which currently they cannot do, so on this network. So I look at this network as, if you're not on the network, what you've got secondhand books once again. And that's simply not acceptable. So how do we create that conversation where all of us get to equally share in this? And it started to kind of look like, you know, this network started to look like the new Underground Railroad in terms of technology. And how do we make sure that folks get to play with it? So the quote that constantly rings in my mind every day as a result of starting to play with this game is this one. When Geri and I started playing in this world, it was like, we are interested in the ways the academy can connect with community to create new opportunities for shared collaborative educational equity. We are continuing to explore ways of creating community through this technology. And that was a direct quote from, and you can't see it very well, but she did on this network a masterclass with Terry Lynn Carrington out of Berkeley, and it was, you know, it was nothing but fun. And then, as AJ was speaking, Another example of the use of this network was the Spooky Interactions event that we did with George Lewis. So we were at the University of Pittsburgh, which led the effort, the UC Irvine, University of California, and of course, my institution, SF Jazz. I would mention, of course, SF Jazz is the only non-EDU performing arts institution on this network. And when I left the organization in the East, for whatever reason, they were not quite interested in participating in this particular network configuration. So as a requirement of me coming to San Francisco, I said, I'd be happy to do it as long as you're willing to play in this ballpark. And they said, let's do it. So that's one of the reasons I went to SF Jazz. So once again, collaborations like this. Another collaboration that Geri and I created was one, we called it Synectivity, which is a distributed performance between UC Davis. You'll see a lot of, obviously, California institutions in that because we're California. The CENIC stands for the Corporation for Education Network Initiatives in California. So all of these initiatives will have some element of California in them to support their participation. But the fact of the matter is, it's like California was not the border. California was just a participant. And Geri helped create, the bigger conversation around collaboration through that. In this particular case, Geri was at UC Davis. We engaged the New World Symphony, who, by the way, is the leading arts organization to participate in this network, and us little guys at San Francisco Jazz. So that was another event we did, but it also became multidisciplinary in that this Lehigh, which is my alma mater. There's this gentleman, you might have seen him on CBS. He's a commentator. He talks about hip hop music, and his name is James Peterson. We brought him via the technology to a conference in California where he and Geri and the president of the network talked about how interdisciplinary the network could actually be. So this whole conversation, like Esperanza was talking yesterday, how do we expand into new areas? How do we engage new audiences, and still keep the integrity of what the music is about? That was the conversation that Geri and I continued to create. And she kept showing me opportunities of where that could be. And this I don't expect you to take this all in, but over the last 5 years, here are the projects that Geri and I was working on. You can see them. One of the things that we did in the state of California, we started pushing down. California, quite frankly, is rather progressive around this network. So they have connected all of the public schools in the state now on it. And in the last 2 years, they have started creating opportunities for all of the public libraries to participate on this network. So Geri and I created opportunities to not only connect with higher education, but also K through 12 and public schools. Because I don't know about you, but some of my very first educational opportunities came through the public library. So we wanted to create the sense of community around these institutions as a model in California and have that proliferate throughout the rest of the country. And then there's this new narrative that's emerging, which recognizes jazz at the forefront of various disciplines, whether it be leadership, specifically business, even quite frankly, Vijay, I'm sure you can appreciate this. If you've not read it, it's a great book, The Jazz of Physics. I mean, jazz is being recognized as a model for all types of collaboration and cross-disciplinary focus. My favorite, quite frankly, because I'm in the mega tech capital of the world, is this relationship between what's called Agile. And if you're not familiar with Agile, it was birthed as a result of the high-tech industry software development. The most popular form is called Scrum, but it's all about how how different processes with less structure can actually be more productive than others with lots of structure. So I know I'm just going to run through and show you a result. I'm hoping this will pop for me. And it's not. So I have a video, but it's not showing. So what I will tell you is that I know that this technology was incredibly important to Geri, because when she passed, you know, one of my responsibilities was to go clean out her office, of which, you know, was a very difficult thing to do. But strategically located on one of her shelves was this award that she received and it was actually the first one given outside of the state to a performing arts institution. The University of Pitt got the Innovations in Network and Applications Award from California. And Geri and her team, which included all of these folks that were involved in whether it was the Mary Lou Williams Project or the Spooky Interactions Project, it really just speaks to the opportunity of collaboration on a very larger scale and interdisciplinary focuses in terms of creating greater audiences for our music. So, in closing, I would say my real title to this event is Geri and Mount Allen's Scheme for World Domination Through Global Literacy.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Because that's what it's all about. That's what connected us. I mean, Geri was about music first and foremost, and I was looking for opportunities that kids, whether they be from Appalachia or from urban towns or from Bangladesh, or if there are institutions of higher education across the world, there are opportunities that we can better educate all of our kids. And if our kids are better educated, then they'll make better decisions and they can change the world. But it's got to start there. Okay? That's it. Okay.
Well, why don't we open it up to questions from the audience right now?
I'd just like to add if there is one other aspect that comes to mind with Geri's education side of her life, and that's the New Jersey, the Montclair, where she was at Montclair University, and she started the first jazz camp for girls.
Right.
And she asked me to be part of the very first one. And another amazing thing she was able to finagle was to get us in there all day and then put us in the car and go into New York and play every night at the Stone, that small little club on the East Side. And then she'd somehow make it there the next morning and start all over again with a whole new group of artists. And I think that was, they may be going into their third year or second year, but Geri started that. And I just wanted to add that for the record, that was another aspect, and that was the in-between, where it wasn't, they were just kind of preparing the young female and building the confidence that was necessary at that point to continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a grand strategy there in Geri's life and approach to music and education. You know, we've heard over and over this theme of inclusiveness, of access, of giving people a chance. Yoko mentioned some of the more less prepared musically in their training students. Geri didn't find that an issue, though, you know, because she knew that the music would make all their lives better, no matter what they learned, and that a few gems would come out of an occasional gem would come out of it. But, you know, but she's only giving back what she had learned. I mean, you know, I know about her relationship with, like, Marcus Belgrave, and I know about her relationship in D.C. with John Malachi. You know, when you've received that kind of teaching, that kind of gift of passing it on, you do one or two things with it. You either think that you invented the world and you don't, it's tough, everybody else get it, or you share it. And we're all kind of emblematic of that kind of reaching out and inclusiveness. And to think about the technology side of that Mount has brought in, it's another side of the same coin.
Absolutely.
It's access to places that this possibility through technology, and boy, as an engineer, I know technology can be oversold. Sorry. There's access through technology to places far off the grid of where the money piles and the resource piles are. It opens this possibility of including a whole bunch of people who've been marginalized.
Right.
And what is jazz if it's not about the marginalized and their fight with technology, and if technology is highways and factory assembly lines, what is jazz if it's not that?
Right.
Can you say more about the actual, what do you call them, telematic performances that you were able to do using some of this?
I sure will, and I have some video from it. So, Mel, help me out if I miss any details. Geri says, yeah, we did this concert with performers in different, but we want to go a bit much better. So we're going to have George Lewis is doing a residency here. The great George Lewis is doing a residency at Pitt, and he's going to bring in a guy to help set up his artificially intelligence piano. He has a program named Voyager that participates, listens, and plays in duets. He's trying to deal with the process of improvisation in machine language. So you're going to have those artists and Geri all in Pittsburgh. And then in Irvine, is going to have a Professor Michael Deason, who plays trombone, Nicole Mitchell on flute, and another one of those pianos with the artificial intelligence going. And then at SF Jazz, at Francis Wong, right?
Yes, Francis, right.
So their job was simpler, but not simple.
Well, so may I add?
Yes.
So part of it is that as an engineer, you know that the use of MIDI requires a lot less oomph to get from point A to B. However, strict audio requires more. Video requires the most. So what we look to do is we were actually looking at applications that won't run on your regular computer. They're applications that are actually designed for incredibly high bandwidth networks. So we took two applications, one from this guy in the Czech Republic, who Miloš Liska from the university.
That was the video.
Yeah, and he's all video. So his favorite term in English is 8K. 8K.
Yeah.
Because he likes super high-end video. One of the things that's been lacking in terms of the interface of music is high-quality video with high-quality audio.
Right.
And so we took, and I'll take credit for this particular partnership.
Oh yeah, that's yours. Yes.
I took him, and there's a gentleman out of Stanford by the name of Chris Schaaf who wrote a program called Jack Trip. Right. So I put those two guys together and say, why don't you guys work together and let's do something really, really fabulous so the audio and the video work well together. And that's the basis of that partnership.
Yeah. And the major technical innovation, if I can get technical, the major technical hurdle is not bandwidth. There's enough bandwidth to get what you need done on the internet. The pipe is big enough to carry the audio and the video signals back and forth. The issue is what's called latency. It's the delay. It's similar. The worst case of latency is when you're on your cell phone and the person is way behind. You hear your voice coming back to you way behind.
Or a bad Japanese movie.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's an easy way to think of it, is the lip sync of when a movie's been dubbed. Latency absolutely kills musical performances. If you're on if audio is coming to you from another place and you're playing along and things are happening more than a few milliseconds behind, and a few milliseconds is the problem. then the whole thing is kibosh. So it was a tremendous project of having the latency. Oh, and by the way, sorry, not to get too technical. I've said that 3 times. Latency isn't just a transmission issue. It's also a processing issue.
Right.
You will generate most of the latency before you even hit the internet. For the buffering of computers, for the processing of signals before they even come out of the box that you're using, you will be. So you have to look, hunt, and kill latency everywhere you can find it. And then, so latency is a problem just as of itself, but if the latency of the video and the latency of the audio get too far out of sync, then that's also craze-inducing. In other words, you could turn the picture off, and if the latency was reasonable on the audio, everybody would be more or less happy. But if they're looking and you're seeing, and then you hear, boom, it can be quite disturbing. So should we look at a little of this?
Sure, and while you cue it up, let me also say a couple things about
Sure.
that.
Sure.
So absolutely right. So you've got the whole processing piece on the front end, what's going on in the middle as it transfers, and then the unprocessing on the other end, which creates those time delays. And so there's a group of folks that initially that are now on board in recognizing that jazz is a true test of the network, as opposed to European classical music where you know every note and you can really cheat. You can't cheat jazz. So that's what I've been telling these folks for the past 5 years. It's like, if you can make jazz work on this network, then your network works. And so they've gotten on board with this, and they're actually designing to the intricacies of jazz. Now, that's all great in terms of like that piece of it, but what Geri was very concerned about is like that we didn't lose what's underneath that in terms of expressing this music. Like really, what is this music about? What is it about this music that makes this communication so well, I don't want to say effortlessly, seem so effortlessly? What's underneath it all? And let's not forget that as we advance this technology. And so that was always the thing that was in my ear. It's like, yeah, but don't forget about, but so how do we do? And so she would bring in some of the greatest musicians and scholars to participate in that ongoing conversation about not letting the music get buried in the technology. And so,
I have a wonderful addendum on that, and that is, so the audio is coming out of, the audio for the distant places are coming out of speakers or headphones for the musicians, and so I'm project manager. I got to solve every problem or find somebody like Mount that can solve every problem. And on the day of, in the tech rehearsal, Geri says, well, talking about the music being in the foreground of all this technology mix, I don't have any presence from the other musicians. I mean, I'm hearing this sound, but it's, for this to work the way it's supposed to work, it should feel like they're in the room with me.
right.
Right? So I'm not getting the presence I want out of the house system, and I'm not getting out of the headphones, so I gotta go out and get her some new headphones. Okay? And that problem is solved. But at the last minute, she's like, yeah, this house audio PA is not working. This is 10 o'clock the night before. Can we rip that out and get another one in here tomorrow? and really, it wasn't completely her desire for it to sound better. It was also to make sure that George Lewis was completely happy with what he heard.
Right.
And I gave George this kind of look. And George said, well, Geri, if you know George's voice, well, Geri, it would be, we wouldn't know what we'd really get. We could rip it out and what we could put in could be worse. So why don't we go with what we had? but it was out of her concern that the music sound and feel like music despite all of this technical overlay. Right. So let's look at a few minutes of the concert. And it's quite dark, so we have to bring the lights down a bit. And the volume up. Hey, I think I picked the one moment where the video didn't work. Oh, no, it's freezing up here for some reason.
Well, while we wait for that, let me
Get off
also
of full
say,
screen.
this is, everyone talks about how Geri pushed people beyond beyond their limits. And, I'm quite happy to say I was continually pushing Geri. I felt that I had that right. And so, she would bring to folks really interesting opportunities as a result of these wonderful, wonderful conversations that we had in Possibility. So, and it's wonderful to hear how so many of them have actually materialized in the real world.
Maybe I'll chime in while AJ's getting it started too. One of the amazing things about being on this panel for me too is to see how many different levels Geri was keeping track of at once in her educational work. That she could jump back and forth between talking about technological access and throughout the world and to minority-serving institutions with Mount. She could be teaching a 350-person lecture. She could be organizing her program at Montclair, which was so fantastic. And she would also be calling us about individual students and calling individual students about problems and just her ability to see all.
So our colleague at UC Irvine, the video colleague, managed to overlay all these video streams on top of each other. So this person is in Irvine, this person is in Irvine.
That's Michael Dessinen.
Right.
Yeah.
This trombone you see, that's George in Pittsburgh. There's Geri. I'm going to move out a bit when it's more Geri-centric. There we go. There's the artificial intelligence piano playing itself. So at this moment, the focus is on this duet between Geri and the Voyager piano. One thing you quickly learn playing with the Voyager piano is you cannot outnote it. I also think George has given it a 10-note limitation, but in theory, it could play 88 notes at the same time, and that's another thing you'd have trouble competing with.
Well, thank you so much. We're almost out of our time, but I'd like to see if there are any questions out there, and then we'll have our coffee break and move on. This has just been like illuminating. Who knew? This network stuff is fascinating.
I would also say, too, it sounds like we're talking about 40 years in education right now. We're talking about 3 years Geri did. Everything at Pitt. Mount's been working on some of this before, but yeah.
Well, she taught at Howard, she taught at...
Right. Oh, she did have a 40-year career, but just to give a sense of how active she was and how just it was always ever forward with all of this stuff. Everything that we've talked about.
One postscript I put on the whole thing is about students. I'm sorry. The focus on students. Do you recall, Michael, that every single time we would have like one of these let's huddle up meetings, that at some point, how are our students doing? And we would go down this roll call of all of the grad students. We would have to discuss the progress of each and every student. No grad student left behind.
Right. Or my favorite other one from that student panel was one of our undergraduates, Ryan Salisbury, told a story about how when he was applying to Pitt, 17 years old, sent in his application, sent in some
yeah.
recordings and things.
That's a great
And then he's just, going around waiting to hear back from colleges, and he gets a phone call from a number he doesn't hear one day. And it's Geri Allen, and she just wants to chat with him about what are your goals as a musician, what are your goals in college. And think about that, being 17 years old and getting a call from the giant of the piano in the world saying, what would you like to do? What can I do for you? Yeah, it's just amazing.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, Jay.
I mainly want to just say thank you for bringing this whole other plane of existence that she dwelled in to this conversation for this weekend, because I had an inkling of it, having participated in one of the earlier versions of this, and I was the one who put her in touch with Michael Desson and told her about Jack Tripp and that whole thing. But we mainly knew about Geri in the world, right? As an artist who had an impact through the doing of music, and I direct this summer program up at Banff, and so I would get all these applicants, and whenever there'd be a letter from her, a letter of recommendation for one of these applicants, it'd be, she took her time on those things. And when I add it all up, how much time she put in on all of these efforts, it seems kind of unreal, So I guess I'm just, it's sinking in for me. I knew this, but it's sinking in for me to see the depth of her involvement at the institutional level, and as an artist, and as a family person, and as a member of her community, many different communities that she was a part of, that, this was a giant among us, and we were all just so fortunate to have any glimpse of her presence in this world. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, I want to thank